Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We are at the Drunken Tarrasque again. Where's my
Woo!
beer, and where did my table go?
No beer for you. No beer for you.
Yes, today we're talking about drunken DMs and terrain now, just terrain.
just terrain. We're going to talk about the importance of terrain to your game, your campaign, and yeah, hopefully we're going to have a little bit of fun today with all of that.
Well, the the biggest thing when it comes down to this is the technical side that everyone rolls their eyes, gets bored with, but it's the biggest thing that players and DMs can change a boring map into a fun one, or at least an engaging one. And
I
yeah,
disagree that it's so much technical as it is the opportunity to have fun, like you said. This is the opportunity to change everything, to change the difficulty of a campaign without having to use necessarily stats. But it does up the difficulty level.
yes, it's one of those things is that terrain. When you start tackling your games, many people try to put all this detail into your game, into your maps, and this is the part where a lot of people are going to be futzing over it because they want to make it just perfect. You're never going to get it perfect. You got to accept that one fact. You're never going to get it perfect. So how do you run with that? Well, when you start creating these things, you got to take the basic concept of you're going to be playing a tactical moment, or you're going to be going through things, and that precipitates the idea of what is the environment. And when you as a DM give these detailed and glowing, like, oh, there's this jungle with all these leaves falling down, these vines hanging down, you've now created a picture and a tone for everyone in the party.
Mm-hmm. It creates the tone. It has the potential to carry the story along, to test your character's limits. Um, there's so much that you can do with it, and I think it's very underused. A lot of people will just kind of throw stuff in there, and they're kind of like, yeah, whatever, we're just gonna throw this in as we go. And I can understand people wanting to do that, that's fine. But if you want to take it to the next level, you should really consider terrain difficulty and different things that are often underused.
Mm-hmm.
Like just before we started, I was talking about the concept of placing your characters in open water, for example. Like that is not
Like the shape,
it's
it's like you got to make sure the shape of your water is perfect, right?
Damn it, Mike, we're not going to talk about the fish man. But but what I'm saying is that if you're in open water, it affects a lot of things. Like if you've got somebody who's got heavy armor, they're going to have a difficult time staying afloat. Or there's so many different battle things you can do that would be fun. Like if you have them fighting a sea monster at sea, and you have a cleric who's got water walk, like you can have a halfling right on their back, like casting spells or something. If we just while he's like skating across the water.
Well, I mean, that's one of the other important things is that when you do these games, when you put different terrains, you're going to inadvertently give certain classes a disadvantage, but also certain classes to shine, like a ranger's ability to ignore difficult terrain or part for the party, or my favorite one is a monk who has the ability to run on water, and like Rachel described about that whole battle going on and about with a sea monster, you now have someone who can literally zip on the water, be damned of what the official quote-unquote rules are, because this makes more sense. You're running around, you throw a punch as you're zipping by, and running on top of water. Like, that literally changes the whole entire battlefield to, it's no longer terrifying for everyone, but at the same time, you start looking like it, like, your now major player to really help you are the people that can manipulate the environment. And they are going to have a moment to actually have this, I'm the hero for a moment. I'm no longer relegated to...
Exactly. And that's the really cool thing, is that you can change the entirety of how people attack in a party just from the change of terrain. Because some terrain is going to favor some characters, and other characters it's going to be unfavorable to. Like I said before, characters with heavy armor are not going to be good in water, or less agile characters are going to mess up if they're on ice or something. Like, these different things are way more important than I think people pay attention to. And there are so many things. The reason I talk about this, and I think that we're talking about it, is because this has the potential to be both difficult and really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so exciting to think about it.
Well, I mean, that's the part. When you start playing, there are a lot of utility spells that people don't think is useful. Now, for me, Mold Earth, I think that's a cantrip where you can kind of manipulate a small batch of the Earth. Well, someone like me goes, if you're a high enough level, it would make perfect sense for you to transform and mutate your cantrip into an actual spell where you can rend the fabric of the ground into a terrain that supports your teammates, like lifting them up off the ground to give them your archer's ability to pin down an enemy attacking, or if you have a huge army, funnel them into a position where you technically don't need that much of anyone to fight them. You can literally go, I'm going to force them to fight one-on-one, or if you're an evil sorcerer, burning hands at the people charging in through this element you've funneled to. Again, perfect teamwork building actual exercises.
Mm-hmm. And never underestimate the power of the bottleneck. So if you've got things like narrow passageways that actually can be used tactically. So if you have a whole bunch of people and you want to level out the difficulty, just have a narrow passageway or something like that your players can run through, because that means that it can limit the number of people in a huge crowd that they have to fight, or creatures that they have to fight. So if there's this huge dragon or something, or this huge creature that you're having to fight, but they can't quite get in there into the narrow passage, it levels the playing field a little bit, but only for a while, especially if it's a dragon or something, because they can, I would imagine they can breathe fire into the hole or something.
Well, one of the other things is, how do you create terrain really well? Well, one of the bigger things is, this is the way how your players are going to be engaging and interacting with the DM's world. If you start talking about how you have these braziers of fire, magical fire, or what looks to be like bubbling oil that's burning off and creating light, you kick one of those fuckers over and you've now changed the terrain. It's kind of also what happened in our game recently when someone used thermite and then shot Ray of Frost over a small area, and the chemical reaction changed the environment massively.
Yeah, now they're going to be asking how it is that we managed to make thermite, and you need to ask Eric about that. Eric figured out a way.
But the whole premise is that some of your little abilities can do drastic things because it's how you use them. Well, Rachel shot something over, caused a chemical reaction that changed the whole area. You had a whole entire wall blow out, and the magical equipment started to deteriorate. And this actually offered some of the greatest possibilities for players to do many things. You also started the whole ability that you use that huge, massive explosion to terrorize and intimidate. You distorted terrain and use that to your advantage to convince an army of mage-wielding kobolds to follow you, that this one kobold, Tenebron, was their god reincarnated. That's kind of something little with just a momentary of manipulating terrain, even though it wasn't that small of a manipulation.
See, this is just going to confuse people because they have no frame of reference of how this even happened. And this is why we can't seem to get enough equipment in this, because when it's everybody at once in this party, we end up destroying equipment before we even get it.
Yes, well, that's the thing, is that this party, this is what I like about my players. They look at the situation of, how do I even manipulate the environment to my advantage? It just happens to go awry in some silly ways, but that's part of the fun, that by essentially just detonating a part of the castle, blowing it out, has already turned the whole attitude of your environment, of people around you, because guess what? You are doing a physical manifestation of manipulation of the world. That's terrifying to anyone, that you just completely rendered the fabric of their perceived world. That is the power of your terrain, and it's one of the reasons why smaller cantrips And when you actually understand what a high fantasy, low fantasy, medium fantasy world is like, offers a power that you don't get. Every single time when you engage in a world, when you understand the limits of it, you can start doing it. Where I'm worried about how my players in the future are going to use the ability to meld through walls and teleport through walls, because they're now re-changing the game of the terrain. Because with the party I have, they treat level 1 spells, and they found ways to make them act like level 9 and above, even though there's technically in D&D nothing above a level 9 spell.
Mike, there's so much. There is so much here. It scares even me, our party sometimes. Because this is why we can't have nice things. It's like, I mean, I love it. It's just, I'm just imagining all the things that we could do on difficult terrain it's really funny.
Well, it's also as you said, what you could do with difficult terrain. That's another thing. Stalactites and stalagmites. You could literally force the terrain to have those instantaneously appear, and guess what would happen? That would puncture people. Puncture
also,
enemies.
There's a spell that reverses the gravity in a room, where you're basically stuck on the ceiling and stuff like that, where everybody in the room is going to be stuck and everything gets reversed.
Oh.
So that's kind of an interesting thing that you could do.
Well, that actually is a powerful one, like right then there. That's another important reason why details for your terrain, how big the room is, how big the area is, because if you actually have a magic user who uses that to rend the fabric of gravity and flip everything around, the map kind of does change, and it forces people to be disorientated unless the party's expected and prepared for that. That's a power, for good or for evil, from the DM or from the player design or side, can start that tension of, how are we going to get through this? It forces you to use your powers and ideas and minds as a tool set to overcome a small problem in, oh my god, wonderful ways.
Yep. So many ways. Ah, jeez. Like, there's just so much here. There's so much to go through. I remember we were talking about a lot of things before we began the podcast, just expanding to all the different things you could do. Like, there's so many options. But yeah, this is really something you can use to challenge your players, to move the story along, to bring the team closer together. There's so many options that you can use for all of this. And I remember, here's an interesting idea, because I think I would like to get to the end of the podcast with some ideas for terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Would you?
Yes, there's no problem.
That?
Yes, that would.
Here's an interesting idea. I mean, I remember we were talking about how a rainforest setting would be actually way more difficult than most people would consider. And the reason being is that in an ordinary forest, you can at least see the trees ahead. It's not nearly as thick. And if you fly up, there's not, you could at least have some idea of what might be going on in the forest below. But if you have a rainforest situation, even if you fly up, it's harder to see everything. Things are thicker. You're not going to necessarily be able to see an ambush coming. So people can attack, or creatures can attack from above. That's some nice music in the background.
Yep.
But like I said before, creatures can attack from above. You could basically be surrounded very quickly and not even see it coming. Because even if you have a character who can fly, and they fly to the top, they're just going to see the treetops. It's going to be very difficult to see any kind of a village or anything in the treetops if there were tree houses or anything, unless the trees extend above the top of the canopy.
Oh yeah, well, and again, like those type of environments, what Rachel just described is given this great amount of detail, where you start realizing, again, here's another thing as a DM and as any smart players, you have this thick, campy treetops. There could be creatures or vines or items that could be damaging an attack. Or quicksand. And again, Then it also, by that very nature, encourages the players to look at their innate abilities and how to use them in every environment.
And if you want to get really crazy, I mean, you could always do something like the fire swamp from from the Princess Bride. Put like rodents of unusual size and have things like, oh, if you step in these areas, you're gonna catch fire. Like, if you really want to go crazy, like you can, and that's the beauty of tabletop is that this is a world that you're building. This is a world that you're playing in potentially, and anything goes. I mean, there are rules, mind you, but
well, that's the thing is
Gary. Well,
that's the thing. Gary Gygax himself said this game is about solving a problem with your limited resources. It's a puzzle. It's essentially a puzzle, and terrain is one of those puzzle pieces that I've seen so many DMs forget or ignore, or again, like I knew one guy who pulled the old Gary Gygax stuff and he wouldn't give the details. He just kind of gave just the bare minimum, and when we tried to essentially manipulate the environment, there was this pushback against no, because many DMs realize if you control the terrain, you control the environment, you control where you're standing or what's going on with it, you can turn the most dangerous situation into not even a problem anymore. Like when Rachel pointed out, like the sea dragon or sea monsters, I'm looking at the idea of a dragon trying to defend its horde. If you have a bunch of magic users using powerful spells to manipulate the environment, they could in theory crush the dragon, holding him in place where he cannot actually use his fire to hurt the party, where all you can then do is like run around them. He can't bite you, he's just being pinned against because the walls have been crushed down on him, and you just stab him until he dies. Like, you can do so many crazy things that even a low-level party can take on the equivalent of a Titaness god in front of them.
And if you have like a cave system and there's a cave-in, it forces the entire party to have to find another alternate way out. So there's so many options that you can do. There's so many things that can be done. And I'm just excited. Like, see, when I think about this stuff, it just makes me really happy. I remember that one campaign that I never went forward with. One of the things I considered doing was having an area where you actually have to hold your breath and swim through a tunnel system because it was made entirely for creatures that could breathe underwater. So you actually have to find a way to the next area, and you have to be able to hold your breath long enough to go to the next area. So that's things like that change everything.
Well, you like your underwater ones, and I understand why, because
it's difficult terrain. I mean, depending on the situations, and also a narrow passage can potentially be difficult terrain because there's a limited number of things that you can do to avoid something that comes out of nowhere. So if you have a whole bunch of creatures that are more suitable to fight in the space, you're at a disadvantage.
Well, and this is the other thing with players. How do you counteract this difficult terrain your DM or you've run into? Well, one of the cases, and this is where you can tell a great DM from a shitty DM, was what I tried to do and the DM didn't want to allow it. I had war picks with me. We were on an icy sheet and going up a ramp. I said I want to crouch down and use the ice picks to essentially crawl my way up, or essentially walk my way up, because I was strong enough to hit it into the ground. He didn't want to let me do that, but it's like, right then and there, your players are using items given to them to tackle a downright damning, dangerous encounter or a problematic area, and guess what? The whole entire party was falling, and I just made the argument, hey, I don't have disadvantage on my check because I'm crawling up, I'm not sliding, I have my level of balance, and I'm using sharp objects to pull myself up. Enough players started going, yeah, that's a good idea, let him do it. Because guess what? I couldn't fight, but I was able to get up that large sheet of ice with no problem, where the whole entire party is slipping and sliding back down Larry, Curly, and Moe style.
Here's another interesting thought process. If you're a DM and you really want to be an asshole, make sure that they're in a narrow passage that is just big enough, and just wide enough for you to put a huge gelatinous cube there. So they have to figure out a way to get rid of the evil jello.
Oh God.
Oh yeah. You want to be, and then or maybe hide a secret passage in there somewhere so they gotta find a way past the evil jello.
Well, that's one of the other things with terrain. I think my most enjoyable thing with terrain, and this is just me, secret passages. This is my bread and butter that I love with terrain. Because
I know.
Yeah, Rachel knows because in my games I have 1,000,001 secret compartments in the game, in every session, in every map, mainly because it will offer 1,000,000 different ways through a problem. I don't like having these one-way tickets getting through there because it doesn't offer any ingenuity. It doesn't offer any unique thinking procedures because when I had, well, there was one part you guys didn't find yet. There was a secret compartment with a bunch of equipment in there and a possible spider or drider there already. That, again, you could do through. One of the things that I like what Eric did, he did it twice. He found the secret compartment to go to the main baddies a little bit earlier, and the other one was he found a secret compartment where it was holding a pack full of gnolls in there. And his first response to it was, fuck no, I'm out of here, slamming the compartment shut and running and relocking it. Because guess what? Like, he already knows, like, there's gold, there's equipment in there that I can get. But my terrain to get there is a risk-reward, because that's how terrain, and as a DM creating secret passages, that's how I look at it. It's a risk-reward. Do I risk going down this secret passage that could have traps in there to circumvent the vast majority of the enemies that might put me against a different area or new treasure, but if I go through here, it's a straighter, it's a circulous route, but I still get there. But it's like you start getting that tension of which direction I go.
Yeah. Also, try to keep in mind the purpose of the terrain, because that will also help you decide what sort of creatures to put down there. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that I was doing in the campaign I never went forward with was it was a narrow passage, and I was going to have I think it was a ooze or something, or a slime or something that burns through armor and stuff like that. And the reason why those things were there is because that's pretty much where they dumped the bodies. Mm-hmm. And so basically those things just came in and cleaned up everything.
Well, yeah, you're talking about the natural nature of terrain making sense.
Yes. If you have a whole bunch of dead bodies there, there will be a bunch of creatures that find, oh, hey, I like eating this. And so basically having those oozes there made sense. Or slimes, I can't remember which one it was. I think, no, they were black puddings. Mm-hmm. And they can burn, I don't remember if they burned through armor or anything like that.
They would slowly melt away in an aggressive manner.
And if you have a whole bunch of them there, that's even better. The way that I had it was that there are a bunch of them there, and they're coming in all at once, and so it puts a time, like how much time you have to solve the puzzle to open the door in front of you. And you can't, it's going to be difficult for you to go back the way you came. And so you're kind of fucked if you can't figure out the puzzle.
Exactly. Well, again, right then there, you see how Rachel has that devious side of terrain, which is here's the thing, no matter what any of these advice columns try to say, this is the fun side of it. It has that stressful moments, it has those panic moments, but they're panicky because you know that they actually now have an impact. When you start realizing, when you put this effort into it and create the terrain, you're making terrain have an impact that you don't see with, I'm sorry, I'm going to say point out, like many of the modern modules, you don't have terrain having much of an impact. It's like, it's been perfectly handcrafted so you get this specific experience. Like, no, never look at terrain like you're going to get this exact specific experience, because guess what? It becomes boring.
Also, if I remember, if you try to attack them with a sword, they cleave in half, and then there's more of them.
Yes.
And they're just gonna burn through all your armor and all of your swords and shit on your way in. And that wasn't even the whole campaign. That was towards the beginning. I know I'm kind of an asshole when it comes to this stuff, but I'm kind of. I'm sorry. Wait.
Well, no, but that's the thing is I don't consider that an asshole move. Or okay, let me put that better.
I mean,
Because you allow players to respond to it and manipulate it again, I don't consider that an asshole move.
also, I mean, there was a reason for it because if you have a passage and you only want certain people to be able to move forward, there should be a way that only certain people or certain creatures can pass through. And so I had that trap be that you have to put blood on the door to get it to open. And they're always going to have blood down there if that's the place where they get rid of the dead bodies. Having blood to get through the door is going to make sense because you're always going to have it. And that's just their trash room. They put the bodies there, it gets cleaned.
Now, yeah, Rachel's focusing on the ecology of terrain, which is... No, it sounds this boring technical side, but it offers so much more. Like you already know with the details I've given with the kobolds you're dealing with. Like, you're already understanding that there's other creatures here. You're understanding that it's all stone masonry. It's very dwarven-esque. It has draconic symbols all over. So you're already getting that whole idea. Like, there's more to it here if we invest into it. And that's the biggest thing with terrain. As a DM, if you get these details there to your terrain, be prepared for the players to even go off kilter. And you be prepared to ad-lib. You gotta do this. This is the biggest skill with terrain and anything. Just ad-lib it. If the player goes, hey, can I find a way to remove the keystone here and kind of jimmy it? Like, let them. Don't do it, Rachel, but let them.
What you're saying? Let them try to jimmy something open.
Well, not just jimmy something open, but like warp the terrain. Like that. This is why I go so hard on the concept of. You guys already have.
See, now I'm imagining how difficult it would be if you had a large creature that just suddenly dropped dead in the middle of the battleground, and you're still getting attacked, and so you might have to climb on top of a dead dragon to continue to fight things. Oh.
Well, that's the thing is like right then there you've just talked about like that is a cool
or a
epic
giant or something.
Well, again, you do have these big creatures that are gargantuan, like that could theoretically easily swallow your party without even noticing it, and having a fight in a battle inside there. You got all these possibilities of terrain, and it doesn't have. It also that's the other thing.
Another thing to think about is size and depth of the terrain. Because the other day when we were using that one area where we were up high on I want to say it's almost a cliffside or something, and there were stairs that were going downward, spiraling down, and there wasn't an edge there keeping us in. Because there was that cliff area, it allowed us to attack going down and from above.
We got to attack from all angles.
Yes. Things like that are really important to consider. But I think we're getting a little bit long-winded.
Yeah, we are getting long-winded because terrain is not one of those easy things that you're going to have this one-and-done moment.
We're probably going to end up doing more stuff and talking about traps and things like that in other episodes and things like that. But yeah, I think we've done a good job with this one. I think it's been a good discussion thus far. What do you think?
Oh, I think so too. Thank you for listening to us at the Drunken Tarrasque. We're going to have... Yep.
Also, if you like us, subscribe to us on Twitter at @ADrunkTarrasque. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and let us know how you feel in the comments section below.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, guys, and good night.